So I'm reading from Carl Jung's Psychological Types. He has collated a whole load of definitions in a big section of the book, which is very handy. So I'm going to be reading his definition of feeling. If I can find it. Feeling, fühlen. I count feeling among the 4 basic psychological functions. I am unable to support the psychological school that regards feeling as a secondary phenomenon, depending upon presentations or sensations, but in company with Hofding, Wundt, Lehmann, Kulp, Baldwin, and others, I regard feeling as an independent function. Sui generis. Feeling is primarily a process that takes place between the ego and a given content, a process, moreover, that imparts to the content a definite value in the sense of acceptance or rejection, a like or dislike. But it can also appear, as it were, isolated in the form of mood, quite apart from the momentary contents of consciousness or momentary sensations. This latter process may be casually related to previous conscious contents, though not necessarily so, since, as psychopathology abundantly proves, it can take origin equally well from unconscious contents. Okay, so he's talking there about an underlying feeling can be, as well as a response to content in the moment, it can also be an underlying mood that kind of underpins the psyche in a way, arising from things that are going on in the unconscious mind. But even the mood, whether it be regarded as a general or only a partial feeling, signifies a valuation, not, however, a valuation of one definite individual conscious content, but of the whole conscious situation at the moment, and once again, with special reference to the question of acceptance or rejection. Okay, so he keeps coming back to this idea that the person is or attempting to make value judgments about things based on how he feels about it. Feeling, therefore, is an entirely subjective process, which means that it doesn't reach out and mingle with external objects. It reaches in and mingles with internal objects. Those objects can come from the subconscious. They can be primordial objects, or they can be internal impressions of external objects. It is an entirely subjective process which may be in every aspect independent of external stimuli, although chiming in with every sensation. Even an indifferent sensation processes a feeling tone, namely that of indifference, which again expresses a certain valuation. Okay, so the whole idea of, well, I don't care, I feel indifferent, I'm indifferent to that. So people confuse I am with I feel, so I am indifferent to that. In a person who uses feeling, in a feeling type, you feel indifferent to that. You're not indifferent to it because you do feel something over it, and that feeling is a feeling of indifference. So therefore you're still placing value judgment. Hence, feeling is also a kind of judging, differing, however, from an intellectual judgment, in that it does not aim at establishing an intellectual connection, but is solely concerned with the setting up of a subjective criterion of acceptance or rejection. The valuation of feeling extends to every content of consciousness, of whatever kind it may be. When the intensity of feeling is increased, an effect results, which is a state of feeling accompanied by appreciable bodily innovations. Feeling is distinguished from affect by the fact that it gives rise to no perceptible physical innovations, just as much or as little as the ordinary thinking process. He's separating the idea of feeling from emotion. So he's saying that feeling is like the thinking process, in that there is no emotion accompanying it, or there's not necessarily an emotion accompanying it. Feeling, it relates to how strongly you feel in your value judgment of something, whether something's good or bad, right or wrong, whether you like it, etc. That is the feeling. It's not just an emotion. So it almost seems like the modus operandi of a feeling person is to construct a logically sound framework within which to work off or work in, so it would inform that person how to act, what to say, what to feel emotionally, what to believe, etc. So it's almost like a framework is being constructed internally. It's logical, it's subject to change, and it'll be changed and refined as the person goes along. And that gives them sort of a rationale for why they do things. So rather than passing out everything that comes up, they've already settled on, I value this. So when it comes in, they already know that they value it, so therefore they get quicker, become more fully realized as a person. Which then begs the question of, how do we become more fully realized? Because you hear a lot of people saying, the idea of growth and becoming a better person. And I used to harm people and I used to harm myself, but now I don't because I'm a better person. So if you're a feeling person, are you judging yourself to be better or worse off the amount of harm caused? Or are you really judging it on something else? And I think one's happiness or peace of mind is often used as a gauge. The idea that happiness or peace of mind can be a gauge for how well you're doing as a person, if you're becoming a better person or not. I think the idea of it being happiness with which you measure that by, that seems to be a primordial idea. Like, where does that come from? That seems to be one of those collective consciousness ideas that arises from somewhere, because it is addressed in religious texts. So you get, like, Buddhism, for example, teaches that, happiness, the pursuit of happiness is an illusion. It's kind of the idea of you are already all you need to be right now. And then you get somebody like Jesus who comes along and says, stop trying to know yourself and follow me, and just do good to your neighbor. Don't be a hypocrite. He never encourages you to go into the mind and start exploring what's in there. and bringing about consciousness to unconscious items in the inventory. He doesn't recommend that, and I don't think Buddha recommends that either. But then I think there tends to be this idea that a lot of people roll with. The more unconscious objects I bring into my consciousness, the more I know myself. Therefore, that makes me a better person, and therefore that's going to make me happier. And when you break that down, you think, where did that logic come from, and where is the proof of that? That sort of knowing yourself. We have knowledge and perception functions, but we also have judging functions. So where does the idea of becoming a better judge come in? Surely becoming a better judge has to simultaneously work alongside the knowledge that we're accruing, either from outside or from within. So I do now question the notion of knowledge being the path to happiness. I think that actually doesn't make sense. If we go back to the idea of the underpinning mood, so the person here is, are they making unconscious judgments, or are they making conscious judgments on unconscious things? Are they making unconscious or conscious judgments on external things? I suppose it can work in all of those ways. If you think about the psyche being self-balancing, as Jung said, so would that mean that if there was an infinite number of people and an infinite amount of time, all things unconscious would be eventually brought into the consciousness, and all changes within the psyche would be experienced? Might take millions of years, okay, but the hypothetical is we've got an infinite amount of time. Therefore, the psyches of all people are literally the same, but in different stages. And the sameness will never be fully realized, only because of time constraints. So if you're saying, you know, I used to be like this, but now I'm better. But if you lived for another 500 years, growing your knowledge and your experience, what's to say that you're not suddenly going to do something that causes even more harm than you did before you perceived yourself as better, just because your perspective has changed? So I think the idea of linear growth and linear getting betterness, I think we perceive it that way only because in somebody's lifetime, that person only has time for one big bout of being bad and then they recover from that, they make their amends, they learn their lessons, the psyche reshuffle itself, and now they're a kind of different type of person. Not really, but it kind of appears that way, you know, now they're a good person and then they die. But what's to say that if they had more time on earth, the perception wouldn't grow and morph into something that then led them to believe that acts that are considered worse than what they used to do are actually now okay because they understand a certain thing about people. I don't know. But their understanding leads them on to causing harm, more harm. So I think it's a mistake to think that once you've kind of arrived at, okay, I regret that, so that means I'm now a good person. I just don't think that is logically sound. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope it kicks off some musings and questions and all that sort of stuff. You know, I'm here just to learn and kind of muse. Also, you know, I know people in the MBTI community sometimes want to know what thinking kicked off this whole thing, you know, so I thought sharing Jung with people and then discussing it would be a nice thing to do, an interesting thing to do, and hopefully helpful. Yeah, so it'd be really nice to see some comments and the like underneath this video. And tomorrow I intend to do part 2 of feeling. I've only read half of that definition, so I will look at the rest of what he says about feeling, and then I'll get into discussing maybe the extroverted feeling and introverted feeling. I don't know what order I'm going to do it in, but anyway, thank you for listening.